Hi, this is Mr. Evans. This video looks at the pros and cons of protecting intellectual property. So we're down here in the specification, and we defined intellectual property in the previous video as the ideas and concepts that are generated by an organisation. Now this might include new products or product innovations, might mean new processes and new production processes, new ways of doing things that improve the quality of products. Or it could be process innovations, or it could be creative ideas such as marketing ideas and artistic creations like books, music and images, etc. So this image here I quite like because you've got the guy with his idea running away from the big hand trying to steal it, and that's what intellectual property is. And we looked in the last video at the 3 different methods of protecting intellectual property: getting a patent, getting a trademark, and copyright as well. And it's important you know the differences between those things and what they protect. So just in general though, it's worth knowing the pros and cons of protecting intellectual property, protecting your ideas. So what are the pros of doing it? Well, it encourages businesses to innovate, as original ideas are going to be more difficult to copy. Essentially, protecting intellectual property and the ability to protect intellectual property is a motivation for businesses to spend lots of money on research and design, etc. Without intellectual property, if I could just come along and steal somebody's idea, why are they going to invest a lot of money in trying to come up with that original idea? Okay. The patent can be sold or rented out as a source of income. So if I come up with this great idea for a product, if I've incentivized to do so because I know I can protect it, I can then gain a patent and I can rent that out, and it can become a source of income for my company. Or we can even sell that patent if I decide that I can't do anything useful with it. Maybe I'm not a big enough company to fully utilize the idea, then I may be able to sell it to a bigger company, and that's a source of income for me. And I've got, at least then, even though I'm not using the idea, I've got paid for having the idea, and I've turned that idea into some kind of monetary reward. Patents lead to a degree of monopoly power as well. I talked in the last video about how they grant the holder of the patent, which can be of a product and a process, of 20 years, where they're the only people who can produce that product or use that process. So this is seen as a reward for risk-taking. Monopoly power is associated with the ability to charge high prices because people can't copy you. It's particularly important in some industries, particularly things like pharmaceuticals and other high-tech industries where lots of people are innovating. If you come up with an idea, you want to make sure that you can protect it. Pharmaceuticals is a really key industry in terms of research and development and the use of patents, because it can take up to 20 years to come up with a design with a new drug that, maybe let's say it's fighting cancer. Unless we can protect that by patent, everyone else is going to copy it, and we don't get any of the reward for the massive investment that we've put into developing that product. And there can be benefits for the industry and society as a whole. So, if we, for example, with pharmaceuticals, the obvious benefits to society, if someone comes up with a cure for cancer, the health of that country, the world even, will improve. So, and on a different note, maybe with a less important product, we can simply increase our export revenue because we're coming up with these. We're incentivized to come up with these really good products, and as a country, we can start to export more. So, intellectual property and protecting intellectual property can be beneficial for the economy as a whole. However, there are some cons to protecting intellectual property. The patenting process is complex and time consuming. You've got to show that it's your original idea. You've got to submit designs. And once you've done that, actually, even if the patent is issued, it can be difficult to prove that somebody else has actually taken your design. What if another company releases a similar but different feature, for example, or a a feature that does the same thing but it uses a slightly different way of getting there. We see this all the time in the mobile phone industry, and if you have a look at Apple and Samsung suing each other, there's lots of different ways in which they're suing each other. Apple saying, well, this is our idea, we've come up with this, and counter-suing. It's really quite interesting how those organisations are competing and doing that. Finally, monopolies are uncompetitive and exploit consumers. There's an ethical argument. Okay, so let's just take that drugs argument, the pharmaceuticals one. Let's say that someone does release a cure for cancer and they get patented on that, and that idea is protected for 20 years. Well, that means that company can charge really high prices for these drugs, and that might exclude poorer people, for example, from issuing it. Or in the UK, we have the NHS who buy cancer protecting drugs or cancer treatments, and that's a massive cost to society if we don't have competition in that market. So it's a very complex issue, protecting intellectual property. There aren't any easy answers to it, but you need to be aware of the pros and cons of businesses being able to protect their intellectual property.